Oh, I am recording the session. Welcome to everyone who's joined. We really appreciate your participation in this six-part training series on telehealth peer support offered through the Academy of Peer Services and our collaborators like Amy Smith and Margaret Varga, who are here with us today to present. The Academy is funded by the New York State Office of Mental Health, and we're so pleased to be able to provide this open source free training to agencies and to peer support workers and supervisors across the state of New York. So thank you again for being here today, and thanks so much for sharing your introductions in the chat box. So I'm going to move us forward and turn over the presentation to our amazing ambassador, colleague, friend, mentor, hero, all around amazing person, Celia Brown, who's been with us for every series. And we're just so grateful and thankful to have her. So Celia, whenever you're ready, the floor is yours. And thanks for being here again.
Okay, I had to use a different computer, so I have to put on my camera. Sorry.
No worries. Thanks for being here, Celia.
Okay. Let's see. I don't know. Okay, here I am. Okay, so welcome everyone to session 5 of the APS Telehealth Peer Support Training Series. One second, I'm sorry. Okay. This session focuses on documentation and technology related to telehealth peer support. My name is Celia Brown, and I'm a regional advocacy specialist in the New York City region for the Office of Mental Health, and I'm the spokesperson for this series. This session is being recorded. Please stay on mute with your camera turned off during the presentation. Use the chat box to ask questions. If you don't see the chat box, it may be hidden. You might need to click more, 3 dots, to access the chat and other hidden features. Before we get started, please type your name.
Amy, advance the slides.
Okay. Before we get started, please type your name, your role, what you do, your organization, and what you hope to learn in this session in the chat box. On the previous session, the title of the last session was Providing, Linking to Needed Supports and Services. This session focused on skills needed to match people to match people for the most appropriate services to meet their needs. For example, referring people to crisis response teams, warm lines, hotlines, healthcare providers, identifying healthcare providers, connecting people to and facilitating virtual support groups. The recording from this session will be available on the APS site, and continuing education credits will be available by taking the quiz and completing the course evaluation for this and all of the sessions in the series as soon as they become available on the APS website. Thank you for attending today's session. And with that, I'll turn it over to our trainers for today's session, Amy Smith and Margaret Varga.
Great. Thank you so much, Celia. I was going to say good morning, but good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
I'm Amy Smith with I work with the New York State Office of Mental Health. And I am here with Margaret. I don't know, Margaret, if you just want to introduce yourself quickly and then we'll kind of move forward.
I'm Margaret Varga. I am the Director of Care Services and Quality Assurance with Recovery Options Made Easy. We are a community-based organization in Western New York. We serve 10 counties, so the 8 counties of Western New York, plus Monroe and Livingston. And we do housing, HCBS. We run some crisis respite programs. And they have me serve on a lot of different committees in the community.
Great. Okay, so just to take a look at our learning objectives for this afternoon, our hope is that by the end of this session, you'll be able to identify some strategies for completing online documentation and for accessing the electronic health record, to be able to engage participants in one-to-one discussions, and to be able to explain one strategy to provide supports and goal advancement during telehealth peer support. So within this module, documentation and technology, we have the following 5 competencies. The first is completing documentation. The second is submitting documentation online. The third, using technology to engage one-on-one. The fourth, supporting the person to engage one-on-one digitally or virtually. And the fifth, accessing the electronic health record. So we have a couple of questions we wanted to lead off with, and if everyone would feel comfortable to kind of chat in some answers for us, that would be really helpful. What is your experience with telehealth peer support and documentation? If you could just share if you've had experience, what that looks like. If you haven't had any, feel free to chat in none. And let us know what, is it good, bad, difficult, anything you can share with us about that would be helpful. Let's see if Lorianne is saying none as of yet. And congrats on your upcoming graduation, Lorianne. I saw that you're graduating with your bachelor's next month. Rita, in rural areas, it's great. Access to folks we couldn't reach otherwise. Elizabeth, I document all of my telehealth peer engagements daily. Great. Okay.
And this is a new experience for a lot of people, and especially with the pandemic over the last year. And as Rita said, trying to get out to some of the people in the rural areas, especially as winter is coming, it's a great thing to be able to use because sometimes you just can't go out in 6 feet of snow. So it's something that's relatively new for a lot of us working in peer services, but I can tell you that my staff has found it so helpful in it reach out to people.
Yeah. Wanda's saying she documents daily, so that's great. And then if we can go to the next slide, we have kind of a follow-up question. What's the first thought that comes to mind when you hear that you'll need to learn a new technology? I think some people maybe feel excited about that. Other people not so much. So feel free to be honest and just share with us, what's that first thought? Some anxiety, excitement, worry, oh no. Oh, Rita, change is hard. Only babies like change. Yeah, that does seem to be that way, isn't it? Nervous from Sean. Yep. I think for all of us, and I think Margaret, you touched on this a little bit, well, actually fully, I mean, it's new. So I think all of us had a reaction, right? Even when we knew, like, here's the pandemic, we're all, initially at least going to be working from home in some fashion or have a change to how we're doing our job, right? And so that can create some anxiety. Mary, I'm hoping my muscle memory kicks in well. Yeah. And I think it's good to acknowledge how we feel about those things so that, we know what to do with it. Like, I'm nervous. What do I need to do? Do I need to learn some more? Do I need to touch base with people, my peers, supervisors, friends, family, whatever? Great.
And we're going to talk about a few of those things because I was involved with an agency when we first started getting into electronic health records. And it didn't matter the age. We had people in their 20s up through people in their 60s, and everybody was nervous about it. And we'll talk about, some of the things that you can do to handle that nervousness that happens when you get something new, because we're getting new things every day. And especially if you work for a peer agency, you're being almost forced to come into some of these technologies, is that we can't do a lot of the things on paper that we used to do.
Yes.
So it's know that you are not alone in this process.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the feeling about things is always different when we make the choice to learn it or take it on versus here it is, it's forced on you. Let's figure this out. Okay, we can move forward. Okay, and one more. So we're going to look at the importance of documentation. We do have another question for you. How do you know when you need to document something? And feel free again, just chat those answers in for us. It's helpful. We want to try to have, as interactive as we can with all of you today. Do you know because you've been trained to, or, is it something that you say, oh yeah, this makes sense. I need to document this. Rita, to keep a record. Yeah, if it wasn't documented, it didn't happen. That sounds familiar. I guess we don't need that slide, huh, Margaret?
No, we always need that.
We do.
slide.
I know. I tease. I think it's best to document everything, whether it goes into the electronic health record or not. It's bad. It's not bad to have your notes. Yep. Have to document everything. Absolutely. Yep. Okay. So we'll move forward. So why documentation? Oh, and Miriam too, something that helps me to be able to look back and get an idea. Absolutely. So I think we have these right on the slide here. So why do we document? Well, of course, reimbursement. We need to be able to prove that we've provided a particular service so that our payers will pay us. To be able to track progress, of course, reminder of accomplishments. As Miriam said, a reminder to you of what you did, so you can look back and you know what happened. And of course, compliance with regulations. Probably not the most friendly and engaging topic, but that's something I'm most familiar with working for the state. So there are also the regulations in place that do require documentation and what that needs to look like in the record. Okay, next slide.
I just wanted to share too, is, and we say about reminder of accomplishments, is some agencies require that you do concurrent documentation, and it can be a time saver. It's nice to sit down with your client, and when you're typing in, is for them to be able to see the kinds of accomplishments that they've done. It's that they don't always see what happened, and you're typing and going, yeah, we did this, you did this, and you did that. And it's a great way of being able to demonstrate to somebody how far they've come.
Yeah, absolutely. Great point. And as we already said, if you didn't document it, it didn't happen. We absolutely have to have that record. And I can say from the state perspective, when our field office licensing staff go out for that recertification visit, or if there's somebody else going out from the field office for another type of visit and they're checking in or they're doing a monitoring visit, if what happened isn't in the record, there's no way for them to know that it actually happened. You can say that it happened, and it's not even that we don't believe that it happened, but we have to have that actual physical documentation so that we know and we can see exactly what occurred. And there is the risk, of course, for, you get the monitoring outcome reports that come from those visits, and there could be comments and potentially citations if things aren't documented for us to know what actually occurred. Next slide. Okay.
So we're talking about completing documentation. And part of my job is I oversee a staff, and I am constantly talking to them a lot about, you need to get this in there. Because if you didn't document it, it didn't happen, but also, as we said, for all of those other reasons we talked about. So what is it that you need to include? So this is the next slide. So we look at a couple different things that need to be in there. We look at intake assessments. And that's really where you're collecting that information to know, why is somebody coming to see us? What are the issues or concerns that they have? And what kind of assistance are they seeking? So that's a big information collection process. And sometimes it can get done quickly. Sometimes it takes a long time to go through those to really get that kind of information. One of the things that I do, and I actually rewrote our intake process at least twice over the last year and a half, is I ask the same questions later on. Because I usually open up when I'm talking to somebody and say, this is a weird thing that we're going to do. We've just met, and I'm going to ask you all kinds of personal questions. This is an odd thing. We don't do that in a lot of other things in our life. And so they don't feel comfortable. So sometimes you want to do that as part of this process, but then include that you go back and ask things over again. It's okay for somebody to say to you, it's not comfortable, and let me come back to that. But so when you're developing intake, forms and processes and how, putting that in your electronic health record, understand sometimes you go back and you ask things a couple different ways. So that's one of the first things you're going to include as far as documentation. Second one is your progress notes. And, if you wrote that in, it lets you keep track of what you're doing, whether it's an individual or group service kind of thing. Those, you want them to be accurate, concise, because when somebody, Amy or any of her field staff comes out, they don't want to read the great American novel. I actually had a staff member who she would write pages. And I'm like, this is very nice, but way too long. You want to have it be concise, relevant to the treatment plan. And the progress notes are important because that's how you generally bill for services. And as we move into more things becoming Medicaid billable, you want to make sure that that your progress notes are accurate. Treatment plans. This is your roadmap. Lets you know what a person is going to be doing. What your plans that the two of you have developed of what direction are we going in? Because if you don't have a direction, you're going to go all over the place and you're never going to get to your goal. Releases, again, really important. When we talk about HIPAA compliance, you need to have that permission to talk to other people. And if any of you work in a substance abuse program, you know that they're even stricter in there with the Part 42 and all of that. So I always say it's better to have more releases than not enough. It's a protection for you. And that's a lot of the things that we talk about in here. These are protections for you as a person who's providing services as well. Informational notes are great. The agency I work for, we didn't have those in our program. And I went to our IT department and said, I need you to add this for me, because there's a lot of stuff that goes on in between sessions that you want to make sure that you're keeping track of, but it doesn't really belong in as a progress note. And you want to make sure that you have that stuff in there. Again, it's helping you track things. And then you want to have discharge forms in there, because again, whether it's somebody coming in and doing an audit, an insurance company, anyone who might be looking at what's in your electronic health record, they want to know why you're discharging somebody. And there's a whole group of reasons underneath there that you can develop, but you want to have it in there, again, as something that's protecting you as both the counselor or whatever your job title is in your agency. These are kind of the basics of things that you want to have in an electronic health record. There's other things as far as grievance procedures, different policies and procedures. I'm trying to think of all the things that we've created, but these are kind of the basics of what you need to make sure that you have in there. So on the next slide, when we're looking at all of those, I'm sure, how many of you have heard of the golden thread? I think it's one of the things is if you read any of the things on documentation that you get from the state or MCTAC, they talk a lot about the golden thread. It's so fun that with that, I don't think it pops up on here, it may later on, is actually if you ever see the logo for our organization, we joke when it came up, and it actually looks like a patchwork quilt. And I actually do quilting. And so I'm looking at it going, we should have a golden thread go through this. And so we actually do. We have a golden thread that goes through our agency logo. But it's important. And I actually did want them to do that as a reminder, because it really is that thread that connects all of the documentation. So we go from that assessment and intake to what are the goals and objectives. And that's where you're really talking with your client and going, what do you want to get out of this? What is it that you're looking for? And then those goals and objectives lead to what you do in your meetings. So you always know what it is that you're going to be doing. They change all the time, especially treatment plans, they're living documents. You always do that. And obviously that there's an exception for a crisis. You don't say, I'm sorry that you're feeling like this today, but it's not your treatment plan. If somebody's going through a crisis, obviously that's the thing that you're dealing with. But generally we're looking through and seeing how do all these things flow together. And if somebody does have a crisis, you may then go, when they're doing better, and developing a crisis plan and have that as part of the treatment plan, the individual service plan that somebody has. So on the next couple slides, I wanted to go through and show you how I put together a treatment plan for somebody. And so again, these are things that you're including in your documentation part. And I usually show my staff, it looks like a giant monster, and we call it a PGOI. And it stands for problem, goals, objectives, and interventions. So we start off, and when you're first talking with somebody, you talk about what are life problem areas that somebody has. And we just put a few up here that are common, but I actually have a list of 35 that we go through and look at and going, where in your life do you want to see some changes? Where are things not going as well? And kind of look at those and then ask people to rank them and say, what's good, okay, you've identified 10 things. What are the 3 that you really want to work on first? And, we look at that. A lot of times in doing this, we're asking that miracle question of, if you woke up tomorrow and life was grand, how would it look? What's different about that than where it is now? So that's really it's kind of giving that first step of the two of you working together of, where do I want to see some change going on? And once you know where you want to make some change, the other things start to fall into place. So we look at our next slide of where we look at goals and objectives. Goals, as I've said a few times, they're your roadmap to working with your participant. Those of you who've had to submit things to Medicaid or private insurance companies love goals and objectives. I write all the treatment plans for all of our participants, and I also do a lot of auditing. I love goals and objectives. And once you get used to using them, you actually like them. You'll love them too, because it really, again, their roadmap puts all the stuff together for you. And if you're feeling stuck someday, if you're having a day where you're not feeling as great, you can kind of look and go, okay, we can talk about that. We can look at this as if your participant is stuck also on what do we want to do today. That roadmap is, invaluable for you. So goals, you want to have them be simple. So we'll get the next slide. It just has a few quick hints on here. Simple declarative sentences. John will obtain his task. Mary will achieve, higher level of self-esteem. So very simple kinds of sentences of what this person's going to do. And if they do those things, that's going to lead to following the golden thread backwards, going to working on that life problem area. And then you work on the next slide where we talk about objectives, which is how do we break that goal down into pieces? How are we going to get there? So we have John who wanted to achieve his task. Well, he's got to register. He's got to find a tutor who can help him with math scores because that's where his problem is. Or it could be you're going to identify different ways of doing something. It's steps that, again, is great for going back, letting the person know you accomplished something. You can start checking those things off. And then that leads to, when we look at, okay, we come up with our checklist of things, that comes to our interventions. And that's going, how are you going to do that objective? So if John knows I need to get with a math tutor, he's going to go to Smithtown Community Education Center to attend a class 1 day a week. Or Mary, who at the beginning, her goal was she wanted to have a higher sense of self-esteem. She's going to go to a depression group 2 days a week. So you can call them interventions, you can call them, action steps. You're working your objectives. And it's giving, again, that clear path. Sometimes Joe can say this isn't rocket science, but rocket science isn't rocket science. That is a series of steps. Nobody does everything of getting one of those ships off the ground. They all have their little piece they put together. And so that's what we're doing. We're taking that really big piece and breaking it down into all of the steps. And it depends on what kind of electronic health record and things that you have, of how can you put all of these things together inside that. So that's actually when we look at how do we put it all together. Everybody's going to have, every agency has a different way of how they're going to do this. And I actually base some of the things that I like to do. I don't know if anybody here, and if you work for a really big agency, they can afford it. There's one called Cerner. That's what I used to use as a clinician. I liked the methodology. And so that's how I look at some of this. But you might not be able to put all of this in. So it's like, how do I work with this? But again, you're using all of that information to start to develop your treatment plan and to work with your person. Your progress notes are going to depend on what your program requires, because what a Medicaid program requires is different than what a housing program might want to have you have. What I do in an HCBS program is different than what I would write if I was in a clinic program. It's really going to be on the requirements, both of your agency, the kind of program you're working with how your program is even funded as to what you're writing in there. We put on the bottom, and we actually have a link later on that talks about SOAP and DAP notes. Has anybody heard of both of those? Or either one of those? The joy, if you ever go to school for social work or counseling, they're going to teach you about SOAP notes. And DAP notes is actually in the MCTAC series on documentation. I actually like that one a lot because it's, again, very straightforward. Again, notes don't need to be the great American novel. Is you want things that are straightforward, get the information in there that you need to do. So kind of went through a little bit of this. Any questions on this so far? Or you're all really smart and you know this stuff already. Okay. So the next thing we're looking is, DAP. Okay. That is looking at data, assessment, and planning. And so the data at the beginning of a DAP note is, Margaret is a 55-year-old female. She is coming to our office to deal with depression. And so you're kind of giving some basic data about the person. The assessment part is, she, took a shower today. She did that, kind of that part on there. And then your plan, you're talking about, here's what it is we're working on. Here's the next steps that we're doing. So that's kind of it in a snapshot. But again, the MCTAC thing explains it a lot better. I saw Rita hit in there about signing notes. And again, that this is going to vary from place to place. Obviously, the person providing the service is going to be the person initially signing the note. Some places will ask you to have a second signature on there. That's something that we do at my agency. And that's actually on my calendar. First thing in the morning is I go through and I read all the notes from the day before, whether they're a service note or if somebody's writing informational notes, because on occasion I find out and going, you actually provided a service with this. So let's go back and change that part, do this. Sometimes, you might have a clinic supervisor, whoever it is, but usually you're the first person to sign it. And then it really is kind of an agency by agency is who's going to sign the note afterwards. So when we look at how to put your documentation online, you've written all this really good stuff. So what do you do with it? Well, some tips for really doing it well is doing a spelling and a grammar check. I will tell you, I read some things, and I used to teach English, so I both get very fussy, but I also am able to look at it and go, I get what you're meaning. But on occasion, I've sent things back to some of the providers and said, you got to rewrite this sentence. I know what you're trying to get at, but somebody just quickly reading this doesn't make sense. Or it could be that there's agencies that have similar names, and it's like, you've got to be clear on these things. So doing that spelling and that grammar check is really important, again, for that accuracy that's going in there. Timeliness. We want notes to be in within 24 to 48 hours. Why do you think we want them in there so fast? And not just because I like to annoy people and nag at them, although I do. Yes, when using acronyms, that's really important because not every service has different acronyms on there. But like you said, for accuracy, you forget what happened. It's until you get into the practice of really writing a lot of notes. It's if you don't write things down about it right away, you forget pieces of it. And it could be something very important that you want to be able to maybe work on at your next session. And again, reviewing it quickly and knowing if you need to follow up on something. I ask people to put in what's homework for both of you that you need to do on there. Because sometimes you might have somebody text you or contact you in between meetings going, what is it that I'm supposed to do? And so it's good to have that reminder in there. It reminds you of things you need to go out and do. You want to make sure that what you did was related to what their goal is or to what their service is. Because if you get a nitpicky person looking at some of the things and going, you did this whole session, it wasn't a crisis, but it's not at all related to what their goals are. And you have to somebody who can tap dance really well to get the people who reimburse you to actually reimburse you for that. So you want to make sure that either, again, if it's a crisis, you do on that, or make sure it's related to the goals and objectives. And again, it's going through doing it quickly. And that's good. It's Miriam said about putting text message in verbatim. If you can cut and paste, I think it's one of the greatest inventions ever. Whoever did cut and paste, you can cut and paste a text message right in there and put that in. If your participant changed their phone number, you might put it in there saying, I talked to them on this phone or that phone. So doing some of that. It's also, if you do it, in a timely manner, you're making sure you've coded things correctly, the service type is correct, the time that you spend, even something, and this occurs, everybody has made this mistake at some point in time, is making sure you have it in the right person's chart, because people might have similar names, or you're working on something and you come back to it and you just keep on writing. It's like, oh, wait a minute, I put it in the wrong person's chart. If you're doing it timely, somebody like me who goes in and checks on something that you tell me, Margaret, I put it in the wrong person. I'll tell them, copy your information so you don't lose it. But we're going to go delete that note and then you can put it in the right person. So doing that time part is really important. So, So when we go on, so those are some things just to making sure that your stuff is correct. So Amy's going to talk a little bit about how we getting into using technology to talk with people.
Great, thanks, Margaret. So yeah, for competency number 3, we're looking at using the technology to engage one-on-one. Go to the next slide. So what can you use now? So we have a lot of options. I mean, pre-COVID, we had audio video was something that was allowable. But now, since we've gone through the pandemic, We also have the option for audio only is something that can be used. And so I think a lot of people are probably familiar with the executive orders that were in place for a very long time, put in place by the governor. And we now have a commissioner's waiver through the Office of Mental Health that allows for the continuing use of audio only services to reach individuals and recipients. And so there's lots of platforms out there. And some, you want to check for HIPAA compliant video, Zoom, WebEx, Microsoft Teams. Those are just to name a few. Your field office can work with you to help, kind of guide you in the right direction around what platform is going to meet the requirements. New York State does not, the Office of Mental Health, at least, we do not require any particular platform or video technology be used. The one thing that we do look for and we do require is that whatever platform it is, that they will enter into and sign a business associates agreement or a BAA. That's the way that we know that it meets, all the other requirements that are out there for HIPAA compliance and all of those things. We do also have on our website, we've created a technical guideline checklist for providers to use when they're looking to apply for telehealth approval, so that it can just kind of help to guide them. It's certainly not a mandatory thing to be filled in at this point, but it just lists all the things to think about and be aware of when you're applying. And even when you look at like certain platforms, so Zoom, for example, there are different formats of Zoom. Consumer Zoom does not meet the requirements. I mean, it's been allowed during the public health emergency, but for long-term use, they don't sign a BAA. Zoom for Healthcare does. So it's really important to be aware of some of those nuances. Microsoft Teams, of course, is HIPAA compliant, and it can be downloaded to even to an individual's smartphone, which is very helpful. Next slide. So some tips and things to think about. Make the technology work for you and educate yourself about it. Learn about the platform that you're going to be using. What are the pros? What are the cons? What works for you? What doesn't? And how can you learn more about it so that you feel more comfortable? Because that's a big part of it, is being able to feel comfortable in using the technology yourself, especially, and we'll talk about this, if you're needing to help recipients feel comfortable in using it. Look at the different ways that technology can help you to connect with individuals. There are a lot of ways now that we can use it to our advantage to be able to connect. And be mindful of what works and what doesn't. And it's okay to say, this isn't working, or, hey, I need some help. And that's okay to ask for that, certainly. Okay. Next slide.
Is
Yeah.
if any of you think about applying to actually become, to get licensure certification, Amy, you know the correct title for it, but to provide telehealth services.
Yeah.
There's the whole application of doing that.
Mm-hmm.
If you go through that, even if you think right now I'm not eligible to do this, it really helps you think about all of those pieces going through there, because we actually, now in November of 2021, we actually have spent the last few months working on our application and working with our field office on it. And every time I look and go, you know what, we didn't think about that, of doing this piece. How do we do this process? So of looking at beyond the pandemic, is going through that application really is helpful at looking at how can you do telehealth services.
Right, absolutely. Yeah, great point. So for competency number 4, this is now we're looking at supporting the person to engage one-on-one. So it's not just about you and using the technology, but now how do you support the individual to engage one-on-one digitally and or virtually? So some tips for this: know the comfort level of the individual you're working with, be flexible, and remember recipient choice. So we want to work with where the individual is at in terms of their comfort level in using technology. Some people may be really comfortable. Other people may have never used it ever. And that's okay, but we need to, kind of recognize that a lot of times it may even be helpful to kind of do an assessment with the individual first to find out what is your comfort level with using technology. Do you need some help and some education around this? Maybe they don't. Take things slow when needed. Even when you're thinking about providing a session for somebody, if technology is new to them, you don't have to jump into the most complicated part right away. We have the option for audio only at this point, and we will also going forward once we make changes to the reg. So maybe you need to start that session audio only and then work during that time to switch over to audio visual, and just work on getting individuals to feel more comfortable so that that doesn't become a barrier for them during a session. And also keeping in mind what works for one person may not work for another. It feels a little bit about, Margaret, I think you didn't say it yet, so I won't say it, but it's coming up about the EHR. But everybody doesn't fit in that little box. So it's okay to know that this works for one person and we have to try it a little bit differently for somebody else. Be flexible. And I think most importantly is remembering individual's choice. If they feel comfortable and they're saying, I want to do audio only, or I want to do audio visual, or even when they say I want to do in person, we need to be responsive to that. I think there is also the clinical component, and we do need to be aware of that as well, that there may be times when an audio session or audio visual may not be the most appropriate for clinical reasons, and that's why we're always assessing. But we do want to take into account what the individual is saying in terms of how they want services to be delivered. I just want to look because I see, Miriam put in, yep. This is the main point that I request advocates and supervisors not contact the tech support for assistance for a learner and allow them to request assistance for themselves. Yep. It can cause a crutch mentality, and the little successes go a long way with a learner. Absolutely. Great point, Miriam. Okay, and next slide. And so we have a couple of slides here, and actually this is some information that one of Margaret's staff, Maggie, was able to provide. And this is really just a highlight on the next two, and then we can get some additional information out to individuals. But there are a lot of things out there, and especially in the past year and a half, there's a lot of assistance for getting connected to things. This first one here is about emergency broadband benefits. It's low cost internet. We have some links here and how to apply, a phone number, there's the mail. There's a lot of options out there. Again, this is just one. Okay, next slide. And then another one here through Spectrum Internet Assist, and they also can provide low cost internet. Because that's another thing, like access is a huge barrier for individuals. Not everybody has the ability to pay for, high-speed internet or the costs that come with that, or even to be able to get enough minutes on their phone and be able to have a video capability. Okay. All right, and I think we're back over to Margaret for the next section.
So we're talking about electronic health records and how do you access that? So on the next slide, and I think this is what Amy was going to say, is that when we look at that, is if you've seen one EHR, you've seen one EHR. Every one of them is different. And some of them are easy to use, but often that's just the first one that you work with is the one sometimes that you feel comfortable with. Because I've learned this one, I've got all of this in, you go to somewhere else, but wait, it doesn't do this. It doesn't do what I want with this one. And so, but if you get the basics of how to use one, you generally can transfer those skills to somewhere else. And if you're at a point in time where with your organization, you're thinking about, we're just getting into this. We're going now to look to get into doing an electronic health record. Do your background research, go around and talk to other organizations. And if you're part of any local groups, see who uses what. I'm actually part of a group of HCBS providers in the entire Western New York region, which is 15 counties. And we recently had a meeting about the changeover to core. And we had everybody put in the chat of what EHR do you use, so that we could start to link up together to go, what kind of changes, what are problems that we see we're going to have? And so people could ask a lot of questions to see what it is that works. So if you're involved with a group like that and you already have one, or you're thinking about getting it, go out and talk to other agencies that have them. Something else that you might be able to do is actually to sublet space. Is that some of the larger organizations out there have these massive electronic health records. Could you lease some space? Can you lease time on theirs rather than going out and doing all of this yourself? It's hard, IT departments are expensive. And so it's figuring out what is it that, we need. Is this something of maybe where we could get that kind of, technology that we need through somebody else? So there's a lot of, so don't think that I got to go out and I got to go buy this one because it's the, the Cadillac of electronic health records. What is it that you need? What purpose do you need to use for it? And do I need to get this myself? Can I work with this maybe in group purchasing or subletting with that? The number one thing I tell people is look for training. And if you've never done it, there's online typing classes. That's the thing that benefited me the most when we first implemented an electronic health record at the counseling agency I worked at, is the fact that I had taken 10 weeks of personal typing in high school, but that's what made it easier for me to do it. So practice on the typing skills, and then any other trainings that are there. There is no shame in saying, I need to take this one again. I need to do it again. And that line in their practice. Practice, 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 practice. Our electronic health record, and most of them do, is that they've got a training module. I always assign new staff to go in there and to work on things and say, we've created this person. I want you to go in and write a progress note. I want you to do an informational note about somebody. And it usually the first thing out of their mouth is, what if I screw it up? You can't. It's in the training program, and even the next, we usually can fix it. And that goes back to that whole timeliness part, is if you let us know right away that something's happened, we can go in and fix it. There's very few things that between either a supervisor, somebody who's used to using it, or a program, especially an IT program, that they can go in and fix something. There's very few things that we really can do to it that we can't go in and fix. So when we look at how you start with some of this, we talk about taking breaks. So if you're having problems accessing a program, log out of the program, log off of your computer, walk away from it for at least 5 or 10 minutes, and then go back and reboot. I will tell you probably 75% of the time, this actually solves whatever the problem was. I used to call our IT department and say, I'm having this problem. Well, did you close it out and then go back in again? Probably wanted to say, you're getting paid how much for this? But that was a big part of what fixes the problem. Sometimes you do need to walk away. When they're getting things and saying, that there's an update. We use a lot of Microsoft products, and a little thing icon pops up on the bottom of, you need to do an update. Make sure that you're doing those, putting the updates in there. Because if you're not doing them on a regular basis, then when they go to upload, then you're without your computer for 2 hours. You know what? And don't with it, is it plugged in? Is that sometimes people will look and go, it's not working. It's like, have you had it plugged in? Is your battery charged? The biggest one sometimes is my camera isn't working. To just slide the little thing back and forth to make sure that your camera's on. It is so often these small things that can be very frustrating when you're trying to get work done. It's like, I've got to do this, I've got to do this. Little things. but sometimes they walk away part on some of that. And Amy talked about, some of the regulations with getting started. It's right now we can do phones. Is it something that's going to be going? Is your video HIPAA compliant? And the number one thing, as we said, is what does your participant want to do? We have the ability that we can do a lot of things on Teams, and yet we have many clients who are like, no, I just want to talk on the phone. And some say, no, I want to be able to see your face. It's really of what works for them. And many of them have said, I want to see it in person. And now that we're able to do that, we do that. So it really is of what works best for them. So we're actually going to do a few breakout groups. And I know Amy, other Amy, I said, this gets confusing on here. It's almost like at work where I've got 3 Amy's. But it's going to put people in breakout groups. But I think, are we first watching the video and then going to the breakout groups?
Yeah, I think that would be great, Margaret. So the structure for the breakouts is really simple. I'll create the groups, and then each group will have a facilitator, either EPS staff members or Amy Smith and Margaret. And in your big breakout groups, you're going to be doing some discussion and exploration of what you heard in the recording during these interviews. And we'll have 2 breakouts. There's no link, Teresa, yet. You'll just be directed to your automatic breakout group, and then you'll have a bit of a discussion. So Margaret, I'll move forward and play the video, and then in the meantime, I'll be setting up the groups.
Okay. So yeah, this first breakout group is from Julie Vincent, and Julie works with me at Recovery Options. And Julie was really the person who worked a lot with the staff on getting them started on using technology when we actually went underneath pandemic conditions.
So what do you do when you're teaching people how to use an electronic health record?
So I kind of teach people the way I learn. I'm a very visual person. So whenever I have new staff coming to me, or even sometimes existing staff that just want to learn something new, I always make sure to share my screen with them in a Microsoft Teams meeting. That's kind of what our agency uses the most. I make sure to walk them through the system from start to finish. I show them how to use all the tabs. I show them how to enter a note from start to finish, whether it's a progress note, a collateral note, whatever it might be. I teach people how to look up participants' plans so that they can kind of follow along and make sure that they're staying on track with everybody. And then when I have new staff, I have them share their screen with me so I can watch them and how they're entering notes into the system, just to make sure that they're getting it right. I also make a little, what I call a cheat sheet for awards, to make sure that, if I can't answer your question right then and there because I'm in a meeting, you have a PDF that you can follow to make sure that you're just entering everything in correctly. So it's a lot of visual stuff that I give folks that I think really works well for people.
Can people practice how to do something in your I'm saying awards, which is the electronic health record that we use. So is there some way that they're able to practice what you're teaching?
Yeah, absolutely. So awards is cool in the fact that it has a training system. You can't mess up at all when you're in the training system. So for my folks, I made a fake person. I'm a nerd, so I made a little guy called Harry Potter. You can enter any kind of note that you want under Harry Potter in the system. You can even change a space sheet if you want to practice, entering in new data. Maybe Harry Potter moved, so you can enter a fake address in there if you wanted to. But it's been really nice for new staff as kind of like a quiz. Okay, go put in a collateral note under Harry Potter. Okay, go put in a general chart note under Harry Potter. It's been really good to kind of help make them more comfortable with the system.
So it sounds like it's really helpful to make sure people are getting it and practicing.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really made people be able to play around with the system and kind of play with the different functions, kind of see how things work in the system. Like I said, you can't mess it up at all. So we can easily go back in and tell you, okay, you should have put this in this way. Let me show you how to do that again really, really quick. It's been a really good checks and balances, if you will, make sure everybody's good.
Okay. So I will open up the rooms But first, let me just show you some general instructions for your discussion.
So what do you do when you,
Sorry. So we're going to go out and talk about what were some effective components that you heard from Julie for EHR training. What did you share or think about in when thinking through your own EHR training that you received? And also, what are some best practices for EHR training that you've seen? So when the breakout starts, you'll be invited, and if you can accept the invitation, it'll bring you to your room. Elizabeth, sorry to hear that you can't get into the group, but please rejoin us when you have a moment. And I'll just hit open rooms and you have about 10 minutes. And I'll hang back for those who need some help getting into their space. Okay. Hi, Teresa and Janice and Charlene and Bill. Do you all need some help getting into rooms?
I don't see a button.
Don't think I saw the, I'm sorry, I apologize, Bill.
It's okay. It sounds like you're all having a similar problem where you don't see the
Link.
invitation to join. Yeah, sometimes it's a little bit buried, or something is obstructing that screen from you. So Bill, I'm gonna send you a separate invitation right now
Okay,
and
great.
see if it pops up. I think that was Charlene who I heard, right, Charlene? Or Teresa?
It was Teresa.
All right, Teresa, I'm sending you one as well. And maybe it'll pop up. Charlene, I'm gonna send you one too. And Janice, I will send you one as well. Great, looks like Janice. Charlene, do you need some support getting to a group? Great. Hey, Varsha.
Hey, don't send me anywhere. You sent me to room 5 and I came back.
Okay, that's fine. I'm gonna move Charlene to room 5. Okay. She was in a room by herself, it looks like. How you doing?
I'm good. I'm creating the new courses.
Oh, okay.
New
Good.
courses with new names.
Oh, right. The continuing education ones.
Yeah. And
Awesome.
we are planning to move it live on 25th.
Okay, yeah, I saw that.
Okay.
That's great.
Because Rita was thinking about doing it over the weekend. I'm like, no, people might need to get into it. So let's
Yeah.
25th.
Yeah.
How are you doing, by the way?
I'm good. I'm doing good.
No, with your situation.
We're all doing okay. I mean, the kids don't feel bad, which is super helpful. Hi, Athena.
Hey, none of my people can unmute themselves.
Really?
Yeah, and I just got a little sign that said the host muted everyone.
I didn't mute anybody.
I don't know what's going on. This didn't happen the last 5 times we did this.
Did you mute anybody?
I didn't, no.
I have no idea what to do then because I didn't mute anybody.
Okay, well, I'm gonna try to go back to the room then. What
Okay.
room was I in?
You were in room 1.
Okay, I'll try again.
All right. Thank you. That's odd. I hope everybody else can hear each other.
Or they can turn the camera on and do the sign language.
Or I guess use the chat box. I don't know. Very strange. I'm going to go into a room and see if anything is happening.
Okay.
I'm muted. Hi, Varsha.
Hey, are you hopping from room to room?
No, we just came out a little bit early.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we have about 20 seconds only. 20 seconds left or so. Oh, no, 6 seconds. Sorry about that. I think then they give a warning. How you doing, Teresa?
I'm doing well. Thank you for asking.
Yeah,
I'm
you-
multitasking.
Yeah, and you're masked and in the office, I see.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Makes it a little bit challenging, right?
Mhm, absolutely. But I am enjoying the training. The whole series has been really informative.
That's great to hear. I'm
Mhm.
glad. I'm glad, yeah. We've had some really good people working with us, to present. So that's been a real blessing for all of us and looking
Mhm.
forward to having these already on the academy.
One resource that I failed to mention during the breakout room is, that the Academy of Peer Services does now also offer the basic computer training courses, which is absolutely fantastic. I have referred several clients and employees, that really have really not too much knowledge on basic computer knowledge that has really been useful. So that's a great addition to the training
Oh,
that
that's
they offer.
That's awesome to hear.
Mhm.
I feel like you just gave us a really nice plug for the Academy of Peer Services and the Goodwill Community Foundation basic computer
Absolutely,
skills.
absolutely. When I saw that, I was just like so excited. I just started sending it out, like, because there's so many people, especially now, that it's essential that they have these skills. Absolutely.
Thank you. Thanks for that. Okay, so welcome back, everybody. I was popping into different rooms, so thanks for humoring me and letting me be a fly on the wall. We're going to move a little bit backwards so that we can all listen to a second audio. So, Margaret, do you want to set this one up? You're muted.
It's the next slide, Amy. It's
Okay. Thanks. Here we go.
Okay, so this is an interview with Maggie Romero. Maggie works also for me at Recovery Options. And what's interesting in here, and I think Maggie talked about this, is Maggie actually started during the pandemic. I interviewed her, hired her, and comes in for her first day of work, and they say, yeah, and we're sending everybody home. So she did not work at all in face-to-face in any of the services when she started. So she actually started right in on doing everything through telehealth, both with her participants and learning how to do everything in our electronic health record by talking to me and actually Julie through, trying to think if we had Skype back then that we were going through for everything. So she was talking a little bit about how she was able to learn all of these different things and how she was able to work with her participants right from the beginning of developing those relationships.
All right, thanks, Margaret.
And those who
Oops, Amy, you just muted yourself.
Yeah.
an interesting challenge that I like to describe to a lot of people, because eventually those who were my yes or no people during telehealth conversations, actually, I got to know them more by simple over the phone cues. And one of that is, I have a great example with a participant who would give me yes or no responses, and the phone conversation wouldn't go more than maybe 15, 20 minutes. Out of nowhere, we were talking about how vaccines were rolling out and all that. And I was providing them as much information they needed through New York State Department of Health. And they made a little joke about how, oh, this reminds me of the scene of Game of Thrones. And that sparked a connection there. And I knew that show, my participant knew the show, and we were like, oh, really? How would you think this character would go about it? And how you think this scene relates to what's going on right now in the real world. And they mindfully were navigating their actual active daily living to a show, and it was helping them actually blossom into, oh, wait, if this character would be able to do it this way, I think I would be able to do it this way, obviously without any knights or dragons, but it sparked a great conversation, and it just sparked a great connection and rapport with my participant. A lot of it that I noticed was people fearing they wouldn't have a lot of minutes or data to continue telehealth. Most of them who had mixed feelings about it. And right away, that was the first barrier with my participant we worked on. Because who isn't afraid, especially in a pandemic world where a lot of benefits were being cut short, unemployment was on the rise at the beginning of it. How will I be able to afford phone or internet service to continue the services I would like? And that's where researching programs, how the government phone lines were providing free minutes to people who were in it, those who did not have government phone plans or services, we would contact the phone provider, and they were more willing to work with them at the time prior to the now what we have emergency broadband benefits. They were willing to work with the participant on that. And that was a big hurdle. Like a lot of my participants independently overcame. It's always the key word, free. Free. It's free. And I get it. It's back to when the pandemic started. How will I afford, having my phone data plan be sucked up by one video meeting, Maggie? I don't know if I could do it, or my phone does not, it's a flip phone. I can't do video, and having a smartphone costs a lot. So it goes back to challenging those little small bumps or little barriers along to someone achieving their goal or objective. And one of them is just like, hey, let's sit down and find out what programs are out there and that will provide a free phone, or that will allow you to expand your data plan within your budget. And it's, well, where do I start? I'm like, well, let's start with government phone plans. You're currently, and one of the things I tell them is, you're currently with our services. You're working with us. You definitely would be eligible for other free services. And that kind of gets them on. They're like, oh, like, what do you mean? Like, well, do you currently have Medicaid? Yes, you are definitely more than eligible for a free government smartphone. Do you have SNAP? You could definitely use that to link up to Amazon SNAP program, where you could still buy your groceries online. So the key word is always free, and finding out how you could be eligible for these free services. And a lot of them were actually very, okay, I'm in for it. If they weren't, if they're like, I don't think so, Maggie, there was always alternatives. I'm like, well, if we can't do the video services, are you still comfortable doing phone? Yes, absolutely. And they will take me step by step of what they've been doing. And I would bring up on my screen maybe a SNAP application so I could follow along with them. So I knew where they were at a certain step or something like that. And those who really
Hey, Kurt. Hi, Jessica. Hi, Charles. Do you all need some help getting into a room?
It felt like we went to a room on accident almost.
Oh, okay.
Listening to somebody talk, and then all of a sudden we're in a breakout room.
Yeah.
Well, no, we just moved everybody to the breakout rooms when it ended, and then we put into the chat what you all are supposed to be doing.
Ah,
So Mariam, you should be in
missed
room 3.
yeah.
With Charles, Kurt, Jessica.
Yeah, you'll have to send us back because we all came in. We had no clue we were getting into a breakout.
Okie doke, got it.
Yeah, that
No
wasn't announced. It was
problem.
just a video or the recording, and then we were gone.
Yeah, all right. So you have to accept the invitations. They're there somewhere. Jessica went in, Charles went in, Monica went in. Mariam, you got to get yourself into room 3. And Kurt, I can't move you to room 3 because I sent the invitation already.
Okay.
Yeah, I was in the invitation, and then because I came out, I don't have it again. So you might have to send it back.
Yeah, I can get into it. I see an option at the bottom, so
Okay.
I'm gonna hop over there.
Thanks.
Okay. Oh, okay. Got it. Thank you.
Thank you. Adina, what's up?
No one's talking.
Okay, so you have to try to facilitate them to talk. So did you ask the open-ended question?
Yes, I called on their names and
All right, I'm gonna go in.
okay.
Hey, everyone. Welcome back. Our group stayed a little bit longer. We waited till the final second to leave, so we apologize that we're tardy. But I'm going to put the presenters, Amy and Margaret, back in control to do the large group processing. So Amy, do you prefer that slide or should we just keep it video?
Yeah, I say just keep it video myself. Hopefully that's good for Margaret. I don't see her up there, but she's somewhere.
Oh, Margaret's on page 2.
Oh, okay. Sorry, Margaret.
All right, it's all yours. Thank you.
Okay, so I guess I'll just kind of do a little bit of a report out on what I heard from the 2 groups that I had, which I had some really great feedback from everybody. So thank you again. And we also got cut off a little bit in our first one because we were still talking. But when we met for the first one after the first video or audio that we listened to, Bill was sharing a little bit about how they, when they started kind of services back up last year after, we were shut down briefly, that even though the audio only was okay for people that like the transition over to Zoom was really difficult. So what they actually did was they, for anybody that was able to and felt comfortable, they brought people in person to get them trained on how to use things. So they would help them to actually download the app on their phones or whatever, device that they were using. They would have them practice it a few times, make sure they knew exactly what they were doing. And then they could kind of leave and use that audio visual and have that connection for future sessions, which I thought was really great. Janice said they primarily were doing audio only. They were using lots of documentation. She had to hone in on a lot of skills, access engagement skills to keep people on, reflective skills, things like that. Charles had shared that their pivot was pretty seamless because they were following after discharge were chiefly telephonic anyway. And let's see, and then just as a follow-up, I'll just keep going for our second one. And Janice was with me again, and we talked a little bit more about just some of the barriers I think that Maggie was talking about, where she was sharing that people said they didn't have enough minutes, and how that was like a real struggle for people and a pretty common thing. Or they'd get on and say, I can't talk for too long. And they were helping also to connect people to like what was out there for assistance so that they could get what they needed. Some people might have not been familiar with the technology, or they had older phones or older technology, so they try to give them computer access or refurbished phones, and then also personally learning the technology for themselves. And Donna shared too, having a hard time keeping clients engaged. Since they would be at home, so they would get distracted easily while they were on a session. And then some things that were helpful were like some of those reduced timeframes, because we talked about how it could just be hard to keep somebody on the phone on just an audio only for an hour. There's just challenges with that. So those were some of the things that I heard in my group. I don't, maybe Margaret, I can see you up there now. Maybe I'll pass it to you and we'll just keep moving it through if that works. Okay.
I mean, and in our first group, we talked, heard a little bit about how really being able to have the phone service was just so helpful out in the rural areas, because sometimes, it's hard to get some of the broadband to be able to do some of the video things. So being able to do things just by phone has really been helpful with that. And so we just urged, with, the new, whatever the title of it is, the new plan that's been bill that was approved in Congress, where they're bringing a lot of emergency broadband out there, is to really, move forward with working with all of your people on doing that as things come out there. But that's the tough part, is that they said most people really felt okay with doing the phone services. Maybe at first might have been a little bit, but especially we talk about how your brain fills in what it's not hearing or seeing. And so that said, people were surprised. It's like, oh, you're not what I thought you'd look like, when people were able to go back to face. So that was just kind of an interesting sidelight out of that. And, it's one of the things that kind of losing my train of thought on things, you know, that Maggie talked about with some of her people. And actually, and a few of the people in our group, in our second group, talked about how some were glad to go back to face, but some liked staying actually with the telehealth for a while and of doing that. It is interesting on that, of where once you get used to doing something, and I know with our organization, we've been back and forth a lot on we're in, we're out, we're in, we're out, is how comfortable people have been and been able to adapt to doing things through telehealth. I think sometimes unless we ask somebody of, how are you about doing this? How can we do this together? We always think, oh, they're not going to want to do this, but they are. We just had to ask. So I don't know who else led a breakout group, because I'm kind of looking at here. So Rita did. So Rita, it's on to you.
Thanks, Margaret and Amy. Okay, in the first group, we were talking about the electronic health record, and we were talking about how people got trained on it, and they said that they had a supervisor that kind of oversaw their work. So it wasn't like they had a training environment like Julie had talked about in the recording, but they actually were working live in the electronic health record and doing that. And something that came up actually in the second group was one of the challenges was consent forms. People didn't have any way of signing a consent form and scanning it and getting it back. You know, and I don't know if the electronic health record solves that or not, but, you know, that was something that was a barrier that was brought up in the second group. A few things that we talked about, though, in the first group were the things like co-documentation, where a person, you may sit side by side with somebody as you're entering all of their information, all of their progress notes and whatever you're documenting. But now that we were remote, we couldn't sit side by side and look at the computer screen. And I think it was Kurt that said, well, we just share our screen so they can see what I'm documenting through a shared screen. And it's a great way to do that co-documentation. So I thought that was really interesting. Talking more about the barriers in the second group, a couple of people said that this was a problem, is that people had been with their kids in school all day on Zoom. And the absolute last thing that they wanted to do was get onto Zoom for yet another meeting, because they had been doing that with their education, with their kids' education all day. And I thought, wow, that was, really an interesting. I haven't had a kid in school for a while, so I was not exposed to that. But yeah, I can see that as being a really big barrier. They talked about support groups, the drop off and support groups when it went to virtual. And we actually experienced something that was the opposite of that in our virtual community here at the APS. We went up to 6 support groups per week from what had been 1 support group per week. So we, increased the number of support groups until it started to drop off again. And then when we had a reasonable number of people coming once a week, we went back to the once a week. Engagement was one of the big things that they talked about, how to get people engaged, how to keep people engaged online. And then one other thing that they mentioned was that people's hours were cut. So there was less time to get things accomplished. So I guess with that, Mariam, you've got your hand up. I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you. So what my group discussed were, we kind of jumped from number 1 to number 3 in the first set of questions. And so the component tips that some got were, make it work for you. Whatever the technology is, figure out how to make it work for you and educate yourself. Those were 2 major. And know the comfort level of the person you're working with. How to use the device applications, study that for yourself so that you are more equipped to help them. Everyone has their own needs. So, and acknowledge that. Zoom works for some, calls work for others, face-to-face work for others. So kind of know what works for the other person and find a way to accommodate them. Number 3 was like, what were the concepts that best practices that someone pulled out of it? And it says, like the concepts of, someone said they like the concept of telehealth. but that they must be flexible, right? And remain that way. Another one said consistency. They really enjoyed the fact that telehealth gave them the consistency. And the people they work with wanted that consistency. So the point was, be where you said you were going to be and on time when you said you were going to be on time. Wherever you're going to do that. The barriers were a little twisty for us though, because one of them said, keep yourself updated on the new technology. And that's what they needed to do. And also if they couldn't, they contacted tech support to stay on top of that. Few others said they didn't have any barriers to overcome because they already been using the technology for most of what they did. And a few of them were tech supporters, like United Healthcare. They're like, we got 300,000 workers, so that's all we do. We're up on, we have to stay up on it. We're constantly on top of that. And so that's kind of what came from our group. And I think for me, it's just reminding myself that I remind people, I'm not a techie. Although this is what I do, I'm not a techie. I'm a sociologist. I like behavior. I don't know nothing. So muscle memory is important. And that's something that I stress when I'm working with a learner who needs assistance is let's do it together. This is why I shun the advocate, why I shun the supervisor and the other person who my client wants to, like, that's beautiful. Please move, bring them up front. And I encourage them with all the fervor that I have. You can do this. Let's go. Let's touch it together. And that kind of helps them. So that's how I overcome the barrier. I become very animated and very right with you every section and every step, and as patient as I can possibly be. And that's it for me.
Oops, I see Amy has her hand up.
Thanks. So I joined Athena. We kind of tag teamed for the group together. And the two things that I heard that I thought were really important were one participant in today's group said that he was being trained on how to use technology at the same time he was expected to train others. And that that kind of had its ups and downs, but it seems to have kind of worked itself out over time. But this expectation that we understand the technology ahead of the folks that we're providing support to is not always actually the case. So and then the second thing I heard that I thought was great, and I've actually been experiencing myself, is that if you're receiving support right now and you're home, there's lots of ears around. So when we're providing support, we should be really conscious of the context in which that person is operating and living, and maybe use other strategies like the chat feature, or the participant in our small group is using a game where the person participates in the game and then can share like a tidbit about themselves. So it's not all on them.
Did anybody else lead a group, or is that all the groups?
I think that might be it. Did we have anybody that wanted to chat anything in last minute or something we might have missed? Feel free. See anything coming? No? Okay. Ooh, we're going through quick. Speed. Speed racing. Almost there. Okay. So just kind of a quick summary of what we talked about today. Of course, the importance of documentation. If it's not documented, it didn't happen. Completing that documentation, what it should look like, some tips on doing that. Submitting the documentation online. And how you can use technology to engage one-on-one, make that technology work for you, and how to support people to use technology to engage one-on-one, and how to use the electronic health record. So that's everything in summary of what we went through. We have Miriam's Minute coming up.
All right, thank you so much. I wanted to add, like to Amy, about the privacy thing. I have a 14-year-old that is a Zoomer. So I spend my days, all day, every day, with my headphones on. And so they don't get to hear anything that's going on. And I try to be moderate with my communication. So my 5 cents.
I receive calls and texts and emails on a daily basis on 2 email accounts and the cell phone. Because this concerns vary so much, it's very important that I document as clearly as possible. I've created a template on Excel to keep my notes and send copies of some things to my other emails so that I could also have a backup. I do this on a monthly basis. I keep records of all interactions I have with learners and flag anything I feel needs further attention or follow-up. So monthly, I submit my documents to my supervisors, and they use it for whatever, a number of statistics, data, reviews, what is going on my side of the program as well. This allows administration to later find and know how I'm doing or how the program is doing. I also have to learn how to use the phone, the tablet, and the laptops in order to assist people because they're doing the APS courses. And so I do all that technical piece. One of the things I've gotten out of this is I value my role and I see it as important to the project because no one else does what I do. And without that hands-on directly to the learner, to feedback to the course designers, to feedback to my supervisor, to feedback to my agencies, they really don't know what's going on in the peer population. So I'm also the advocate for the peer, and I become the voice many times for the peers that are taking these courses to help redesign our website, to help redesign some of the courses, the language, different things like that. So that's my minute. It's no small I's and big U's. We all work as a team and we all have to know how important our roles are. And I truly know what mine is, and I appreciate having the opportunity to service. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mariam. I'm sorry that I was unmuted and coughing, but I think I had an accident with my water. So apologies for that. So Mariam, thank you so much for sharing that. To Amy and Margaret, we are so fortunate and lucky to have had you contributing your expertise and sharing stories from peer support workers that are doing this critical service, probably during one of the most challenging times that most of us could ever recall, and really bringing in their voices and their day-to-day strategies and tips. And then Amy complementing all of that with some of the regulations and best practices that we should all be mindful of, has really provided us such a well-rounded and interesting training session today. So for that, we thank you. Our next session is our final session in the Academy of Peer Services Telehealth Peer Support training series. And that one is called Wellness Promotion and Health Literacy. And that's going to be offered on December 2nd, 2021. And we've got a fantastic lineup of presenters for that session, just as we did today. So please check that out. The other piece of this training is just to get a good sense from all of the participants who joined us today, what you're walking away with. And so the question is, what's the most important thing that you're taking away from this session? So please feel free to put your answer to that question in the chat. It really helps to inform us for future trainings, what we can focus on, and improvements that we can make over time to all of these sessions for the telehealth peer support series. If anybody would like, you can please feel free to raise your hand and we can call on you and you can share aloud what you found most important. Tishna says, great information on technical support and HIPAA appropriate engagements. Thanks, Tishna. Rita says co-documentation via a shared screen. Isabella says we're all doing our best. Yep. During this time. And it's important to remember the struggles we face are fairly universal. Agreed. Please keep sharing. There's a couple of resources that we will be providing through the virtual learning community. So Athena has already put into the chat box a couple times a PDF of the slides from today. So before we conclude, Athena, please do that for us again one more time. Amy and Margaret have provided the CTAC New York training on documentation done right, and that's a workbook series. Just a note, you should create an account once you get there to access those resources, similar to some of the resources that you would be getting on the Academy. So we thank you, and I would like to turn it back to the presenters for any final words of wisdom or little tidbits you'd like to share as we adjourn.
Margaret, you want me to go first? I'll go first. First of all, I just wanted to thank everybody for taking the time. I know everybody's really busy, but I think it's helpful to just have a couple of hours to talk about this. Isabella mentioned it. We're kind of all in this together, and just the benefit of kind of sharing the resources that we've learned. We've learned a lot. We made the quick pivot, but we're still learning. So it's so important to just keep sharing and supporting each other. Margaret?
As you get further along into this process of working with technology and working with electronic health records, is really reach out to as many places as you can for information and support on this. I know with our we're looking at different things, we're working with other groups, but really reach out to everybody that you can to get more of that information, because the better choices you make on developing some of this, the easier it's going to be for you and all your staff.
Thank you.
Like I said, sometimes you just need to walk away from your computer.
That may be one of the strongest recommendations I heard today, Margaret. I think we could all benefit from that little bit of a break. So I would like for the presenters and the APS staff to hang back for just a couple of minutes, as people, may want to stay and ask a question or just share a comment. But we certainly appreciate our presenters, and we thank all of the participants for joining us today. Hope to see you again for our last session. And if you have questions, just send an email.
I think it looks like Tamika might have raised her hand too. I don't know if we, yeah.
Yes. Hi, I just have a quick question. If you guys can touch again, because I did the 4th series and this is the 5th one that I'm doing, and I need to catch up to 1 to 3. I tried to access the site to go back and watch the videos, but I was having difficulty. So can you please guide me on how to do so?
Yeah, absolutely. So within the Academy of Peer Services, there is a special section where you register for courses that are called CE, or continuing education. And the way that you can identify this series from the drop-down list of all the possible continuing education courses is through telehealth peer support. And you'll see ThPS, and then you'll see sessions 1 through however far we've gotten in creating those on our website. So it's just like you would register for any other course in the Academy. You have to have an account, you have to visit the Academy of Peer Services, you have to enter the dashboard, and then you choose your course and register for it.
Okay,
So
thank you.
that was a lot, Tamika, and I don't expect you to have memorized it, but what you can do is reach out to Mariam.
Okay.
So, Mariam, if you wouldn't mind, could you just put your email address in the chat for everyone? Thanks. And thanks for the question, Tamika. We definitely want you to visit the Academy and get the credit for these.
Thanks.
Yeah. Any other questions? I wasn't paying attention to hands, Amy, and you caught Tamika's. Any others? I don't see any others' hands. Okay. All right. Monica, did I see you wave to us, or did I see your hand like I have a question? Okay, you're just waving. All right. Happy Thanksgiving. Thanks, Monica. Thanks for being here. All right. And I'm going to stop the recording.